Okay, now during this assembly, I'm going to be using the word different and differences quite regularly. And before I go too much further and before I use that word again, I want to just think about what we mean by that. Because being tolerant and behaving with tolerance means that we accept and we celebrate other people's differences, because we are aware that that is what makes us all unique and the world we live in so varied. So, to act with tolerance means that you show respect for other people's race, their religion, their age, their gender, their sexual orientation, and the opinions that they have as a person. And later on in our assembly, we're going to think about how we can show our tolerant behaviour in those areas. So during the making of this assembly, I was doing some research on differences and people's differences, and in particular, DNA. But in some of my findings, it made me really think about some of the demonstrations that are going on right now across the world, but mainly really America and England. And it made me think about this quotation. It's definitely a quotation that has been very popular in the last couple of weeks during quite a few of the demonstrations, and that is, I believe there is only one race, the human race. And that was said by somebody called Rosa Parks, and she was an American activist. She died in 2005, and she is best known for being a part of the American Civil Rights Movement, but probably most obviously known for her role in the Montgomery bus boycott. And I would urge you to do some research into that. But she's actually well known as being the first lady of civil rights, and she's known in America as being the mother of the freedom movement. And I think she would have loved this fact. If you took two people at random from around the world and tested their DNA, their genetic makeup would be 99.9% the same. And that is if you got somebody from two different races, two different religions, two different sexual orientations. Their DNA would be 99.9% identical. So everything that makes one person different from another is concentrated into 0.1% of that person's DNA. So ultimately, what that said to me was that we have to value and hold on to this 0.1%, because that is exactly what makes us individual and exactly what makes us unique. And that 0.1% is so important, and I just like to take a moment just to think about what a world would look like if that 0.1% was not there, or if it was even smaller in a percentage in our DNA. Imagine a world where we were all exactly the same and we weren't different, and we didn't have different views on things, or we didn't have different religions, and we were all identical. There would be no variety. There'd be no choice in the world. There wouldn't be a new fashion. There wouldn't be a new song playing on the radio. And there would only ever be one painting in an art gallery. A world without that 0.1% difference in people's DNA would be incredibly narrow, repetitive, and incredibly confusing. Think about what it would feel like to walk down the street and just seeing the same people with the same front door, with the same flowers in their garden, with the same clothes on, thinking the same ideas, liking the same things. It'd be a bit like living in one of those hall of mirrors that you see at a fun fair. Now, unfortunately, that 0.1% that should be celebrated and respected isn't always accepted or tolerated by other people. And intolerance of people's differences is incredibly dangerous in the world that we live in. And if you are keeping tabs on the news, both in the UK and around the world, specifically America, you will recognise the name George Floyd, and hopefully you'll recognise the name Breonna Taylor as well. And they both lost their lives because of other people's intolerance of others, specifically their race. Acts of terrorism around the world, wars, violence, all happen because of other people's intolerance of others' views and possibly religions. Homophobia and transphobia all happen because of other people's intolerance of others. Any form of bullying, any form of unkindness happen purely because of other people's intolerance of others. And over the next couple of slides, we're going to have a little think about how we can ensure that we don't fall into one of those categories of being intolerant and intolerant of other people. So I'm not sure about you, but I have over the last couple of weeks been watching the news and reading the news and just kind of watching it in disbelief, really, that I can still be living in a world where intolerance still has such a detrimental and such a heartbreaking effect on the world around me. And it's got me asking the question, how is it still possible? How is it still happening? And it really goes back to that Helen Keller quote, doesn't it? That actually intolerance in people comes from a lack of knowledge, a lack of education, a lack of understanding and respect about other people and their background. And it made me think, what could people do to prevent that? And it comes down to really, really simple acts that we can do that to better our knowledge and better our education and better our respect about other people and around other people and for other people and the backgrounds that they come from. So in order to learn more about somebody, we can do the following things. We can listen to them. We can talk to them. We can ask questions. We can read about other people, other ideas, other people's experiences and learn from them. We can watch films, we can watch TV programmes, we can watch the news and learn from it. And after all of those things, we can stop and we can reflect on what we have understood and what we have learnt. Okay, so before we come to the end of our assembly, I wanted to leave you with some ideas and tips that I think might help all of us to behave in a more tolerant manner. And they might just be some helpful reminders that we may actually need to present ourselves in a more tolerant way. I know I am, having kind of done this assembly, and even now while I sit here thinking about, am I tolerant? Am I a tolerant person? I think widely I am tolerant and accepting of other people. But put me in a shopping market or supermarket behind somebody, a lovely old frail person, I guarantee you I would huff and puff and want to get round them, because in social distancing measures I could sit there being patient with people. And doing this assembly has made me really rethink that, and actually perhaps I should just ask them if I can help them rather than be impatient. But anyway, I digress. So what can we do to ensure that we are tolerant to other people? And the first one is really simple, and it sounds really obvious, but that is to respond to others in a positive way. To look at people's differences as being positive. and think back to that slide where I was saying to you about imagining a world where nobody was different. It would be dreadful and frightening and confusing. And we must always see other people's differences as a way that can enrich our lives for the better. One thing I've also picked up on over the last couple of weeks is that people don't just want you to ignore their differences. People are willing to engage in conversation with you about them. People are willing to engage in educating you about their difference, or what makes that person different to you. So acknowledge and be brave enough to acknowledge to somebody that you don't necessarily understand what it feels like to be in their shoes, because that's their life, but you are willing to learn about it. You're willing to listen to them, to better educate yourself. But the worst thing you could ever do is criticise them for that difference. I think another way that we can be tolerant, and this certainly has two reasons why this is such an important one. In a time where we are very much forced to be in a much closer proximity to our family for much more longer periods of time than we might have been normally, it's important to respect and appreciate differences in other people, in your friends, in your family, in people that you might just cross in the street. And it's important to learn from those differences. We need to make sure that we give people the opportunity and allow people to believe in something different to us and to think differently to us. Thinking about your friendship group or in your family, are there people that think something different to you, have a different opinion to you? What happened the last time somebody disagreed with you? Did you listen to what they had to say or what their view was, or did you just kind of not want to go into detail because it was different to yours and yours was the most important thing to understand? Having people in our world that think differently to us or believe in something different to us enriches the world around us. And it will, if you take the time to learn and understand the way in which they think or what they believe in, it will really add depth to your understanding of the world that you're living in. And lastly, we have to celebrate and accept other people's religions, political and social beliefs, and their sexual orientations. We have to understand that not every single person is the same. But remember that the only thing that makes them different to you is 0.1% of their DNA. No matter their religion, no matter their political or social belief, no matter their sexual orientation, they are 99.9% the same as you. So I wanted to finish our assembly with a reflection on some of the ideas we've talked about, but also I'd like you to reflect on your tolerance and how you show tolerance. And I've put two quotations on this slide by two huge names in the world around us, the Dalai Lama and Kofi Annan. So the Dalai Lama says, "Compassion and tolerance are not a sign of weakness, but a sign of strength." And the second quote, "Tolerance is a virtue that makes peace possible." So let's think about what those two quotes can teach us as we move forward into the week and as we move further forward in the end of this term. And I just want you to think about two questions for the rest of this week and further in your further on this half term. Number one, how can you show tolerance towards someone this week? What can you do differently? And secondly, where in your life do you think you need to demonstrate more tolerance for the people around you?